Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's main event featuring brother versus brother. In the red corner, from Indianapolis, Indiana, an ER doctor, a Christian, a Republican, Dr. David Blank. And in the blue corner, hailing from San Francisco, California, a computer scientist, an atheist, a Democrat, Dr. Doug Blank. Now it's time for the Blanks to rumble!
So COVID has really shaped every aspect of our lives this year in 2020.
Okay, so let's talk about where we can come to an agreement. As you know, President Trump even moved the Republican National Convention. I believe it was going to be in North Carolina, and then he moved it to Florida, simply because they wouldn't let them go mask free. Surely,
Well, I think they wouldn't allow a certain number of people in
without masks.
Oh, yeah. So this is probably, I think, more of a political jump as well, and we've seen this in blue states and red states. Is when to
There is
open.
no such thing as blue states and red states. That was something that Trump started. I've never heard a president talk about states that were blue and red.
You don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, Indiana is a red state. Indiana's conservative. If you think Donald Trump is not going to win Indiana,
Didn't
crazy.
Indiana vote for Obama?
It did.
What are you talking
but in
about?
General,
it's a blue state.
Do you think there's any chance Hawaii is ever going to vote for a Republican for president?
I think that if there was a good candidate on either side, that any state could go for that candidate. So yes.
Yeah.
So back to your point,
that's not true. So there are conservative states and there are liberal states.
There are people in states, and maybe they tend to vote one way or another at this time. But what's your point?
That there are a lot of states that are leaning heavily in one direction or another. And yet the ones who have conservative governors and conservative legislatures, and a majority of the people that live in that state are conservative, have tended to open up their economies, whereas people who are more liberal, like California or Hawaii or say some of the northeastern states, have tended to stay closed down and keeping businesses closed down. So like out in California, you haven't gotten your hair cut because they've still got things closed down. Here in Indiana,
I think
I've had my hair cut every month, this year, because we've been able
You're confused. I didn't say that there weren't barbershops opened. I said I had not chosen to go to one. Every store that I walk down the street is open, but there's strict rules about how you can participate. Like in the hair cuttery down the street, they only let like maybe one or two people in the store at a time. But I just haven't felt like I wanted to risk getting the virus in any situation indoors. I haven't been to any store inside except a hardware store, and even they have a strict policy about how many people can go into the store at any particular time. So I don't know what you're talking about, that it's closed down. We have rules about, the openness, but California is definitely not closed down in any significant way. We still have food delivery. So every restaurant we can order food from.
Yeah. Although here in Indiana, I can go to any restaurant that I want to, and they may have limited seating right now, but for a month now, we've been able to go out and eat. Nancy Pelosi just got in a lot of trouble a few weeks ago for getting her haircut in a salon because in San Francisco, they were supposedly all closed for indoor
No,
work.
I live in San Francisco.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
No, you're not in trouble. You can go and get your hair cut. But my question is, where can we find a point of agreement on this?
Oh, I think there's a lot of points we can agree on. I mean,
That people
the
should wear
virus.
masks. Is that one?
Yeah, you should wear a mask if you don't want to get this virus.
Well, it's
You
not even
should,
about yourself. It's about giving it to others, right?
if you're wearing a mask and you're around somebody who has it, the chance of you getting COVID-19 is slim to almost none. I mean,
Right. But if
if
you
you're
also
both wearing a mask, it's less.
if you have a mask on and you have COVID, the chances of you spreading it diminish.
Sure.
If you're wearing a mask and somebody else has COVID, the chances of you getting it are diminished. If you both have masks on, it's even better. We can agree on that.
Sure. Yeah, we'll buy that.
Well,
Uh,
I guess one of the questions is, should this be a rule? And if a large number of people refuse to do that, what should happen?
what do you think should happen? Is it the government's role to make sure that you're safe? Is it the government's role to keep you from getting an illness?
Well, I think in times like this, there's some very clear things. And, if a store says you have to wear a mask to enter, then it seems like that store should be able to control that rule. And if you're not wearing a mask, you should, get kicked out or arrested and pulled out.
Well, you crossed a line there. So the store can do whatever they want. Your store can do whatever they want and set whatever rules they want. But if you're going to be arrested, that means the government now is in charge of those rules. And that's the question. Should the government be able to mandate
I
this?
didn't say anything about a government rule, though. I said if a store had a rule that you have to wear a mask and you go in and you don't wear a mask, what should happen?
Yeah, they can kick you out.
But I mean, kicking out might include violence and,
So that would be trespass. But my question to you, based on that then, is should the government itself be able to mandate wearing masks?
I think
And
so.
should they be
Yeah.
able to arrest you or fine you in some way if you don't
If
in
it's the law,
public?
if there is a law that says you have to wear a mask in a particular situation and you don't, then you're breaking the law and you should, suffer the consequences of breaking the law. That seems
And
like a point we can agree on.
we may not be able to agree on that.
Why not? Are you not a law and order person?
I don't know that. My question is, can they make such a law? Is
Well,
it the government's role to pass a law that protects you from yourself?
well, it's not just protecting me from myself, it's protecting me from other people that could hurt me. And I think we have lots of laws like that. I mean, do you wear a seatbelt when you drive?
But that's to protect you.
Well, no. Well, I mean, yeah, but why does the government care about you?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
why would I be interested in you wearing a seatbelt when you drive?
yeah. Well, that actually kind of extends into a more general conversation. Should the government be able to do any of that? And my answer would be no, the government should not be able to do any of that. It's not the government's job to protect you from yourself.
I'm not interested in, I don't really care what happens to some random person when they're driving. What I do care about is how much it would cost me in taxpayer money if that person ends up being in a hospital that it could have been prevented if they'd had a seatbelt on. I think the idea of those kinds of laws are really about other people's freedom. And it's really a conservative idea, I think, that if you're going to drive a car, you have to follow the laws. And part of the laws are wearing a seatbelt so that if you do get in an accident, you don't get hurt unnecessarily. So other people have to pay your health insurance because you don't have health insurance either.
Yeah. Well, now you've expanded this into a whole new topic.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
just
should we outlaw people climbing trees? Because if you fall out of a tree, you could get hurt, and now I'm going to have to pay your hospital bills. Should we not allow anybody to
I
be on
didn't
a
say that
roof
they
of a
shouldn't
house?
drive. I said they should drive responsibly.
Okay. So if you're going to climb a tree, you have to have rigging and you have to have special equipment for anybody to climb in a tree. And if you don't, you could be arrested, because if you
Well,
fall,
I I think
I mean, you could expand that logic to all kinds of things
you could
where
expand
if,
anything to anything if you go with this slippery slope idea, but that's not what I'm talking about. You know how many people die every year from being in car accidents.
maybe we should eliminate cars, that would take care of that problem.
Well, you know, if somebody were going to introduce the car today and they said, I got this great device, it can get you from here to there very quickly, but it's going to kill 30, 40,000 people a year in just the United States. I think you might have some people, seriously question whether or not that is technology that we want to embrace.
Oh, I guarantee you couldn't get a gasoline powered car going today. You got fuel lines running right next to an exhaust pipe, and you
Well, I'm
got,
not even talking about that. I'm just talking about, crashes.
yeah, I'm talking about government regulation in general would not allow any part of a combustion engine or a car to get going today.
Well, this
But
is,
again, we're really straying far from the original topic on COVID in today's life. Uh, but I think, as a point of agreement, uh, COVID's not just going to disappear. Uh, Although if we get a vaccine and we can get people to actually get the vaccine, which may be a problem moving forward. And that's actually a point that I had started on and didn't get to finish, is the vaccine itself is not a rush job. Companies who are working on these vaccines started working on these vaccines way back when SARS first came about, because COVID-19 is a SARS virus.
sure.
And so they started working on it. Then SARS kind of faded, but they had always been in the process. They were in the pipeline because SARS doesn't go away. It's still a virus that's out there. And so when this particular virus reared its head, it just took all that research that had already been done and moved it back to the forefront. But the idea that we've created a whole new vaccine from scratch since February just isn't true.
Well,
And
I
so,
don't think anybody is arguing that.
oh, you should look at the news. I
No,
mean,
I do
this
look
is
at the
not
news, but
it's not a Republican Democrat thing, but there are people who keep saying it's rushed.
well,
And
it
I
may
think
be rushed, but that doesn't mean that it started from scratch. I think,
it's still not rushed. I mean, the only thing that's different about this than any other normal vaccine process, because they still went through all the trials, they went through each phase of a trial, but they're giving money to these companies to produce the vaccine before it's approved. And that's the only thing that's different than a normal vaccine. Normally, it's got to get approved and it's got to get that process done before anybody starts making it. But
well,
because they want it to be available, they're producing it in big quantities while the trials are still going. But when it's ready, they'll be safe. They're not going to they're not going to be unsafe.
Well, you don't know that. I mean, you can't say that without knowing the details of how it actually was developed. I mean, if some company came out tomorrow and they have something that you've never heard of, and you've never seen the trials, and you don't know any details about it, uh, you can't just say it's going to be safe. Now, I say that with a sense that there are a lot of people that say bad things about all vaccines, that like the flu or polio or measles or mumps. There are people that won't take those because they believe wrongfully that these vaccines have, things in them that make them not safe. And of course, they are safe. And we just hope that if a vaccine for COVID-19 comes out, that it will have gone through the same processes that make all the other vaccines safe. And
Yeah, it's going to be safe. It's going to be safe.
well, we hope it will be, sure. But
No,
there's
I mean,
no one
it's
that
not
can
a
guarantee.
hope. There's a process that you go through to make sure that that's the case.
Well, that's
So
what I said.
one of these trials, they stopped the whole trial because there were just a handful of people that may have had like a neurologic symptom, and they stopped the whole thing until they kind of rooted that out and weeded that out to see if that was true or not. Uh, I think it was during the Bill Clinton years. There was a vaccine that came out. It might have been during the Carter years that a vaccine came out, and it's escaping me right now what it was for. But a fair number of people got a neurologic disease called Guillain-Barré.
Oh, yeah. I know
And
what you're
so,
referring to.
yeah, so that changed the way we were actually doing studies and some
Yeah.
of the research to make sure that we don't miss those types of things. And of course, way back in like the 30s when they had the thalidomide disaster where a lot of babies were born with missing arms and legs. So the last thing any drug company wants, last thing the government wants, no matter who's in charge, is to get a vaccine out there that has side effects. So they
Well,
are going to great lengths to make sure that that will not be the case.
I don't think you can really say anything for certain about this government and what they will and won't do. Uh, I mean, no one could say things like that. You can't guarantee that there's not something that's being done for a political reason. I mean, it's just a point of fact. I don't know if something was being done for a political reason from lots of presidents. You can't just say that as a point of fact.
No, I'm saying that the president is not putting these out or making them. He would like them to come out tomorrow if he could, but they're not going to come out until they're ready because the drug companies can't afford the
Yeah.
lawsuits and
Well,
stuff if things
I
go
completely
bad.
agree with that, but you went further than that. You said that no government would put out something that would harm people.
What's
And
the FDA that approves it? I mean, there are government agencies
yeah,
that will approve or not approve this, but they still have to get through the trials
yeah.
in a
Well,
certain way.
I
I mean,
think
there
this
are
is
scientists. So this is, you know, is it science or is it not science? And these are scientists that are running this. They're scientists at the FDA. They're not, they're not Trumpers. And if you're going to say that the FDA does the bidding of Trump, then at the same time, you'd have to say, well, then the FBI does the bidding of Obama, or the FBI or some other agency
no,
does
come on.
whatever the agency. And that's
That's
just not true.
you can't. That's no. That's not the way it works. You can't say that any agency is political or not political. I mean, there's evidence that, for example, the CDC has been uh, affected by politics. I mean, there's evidence for that. I wouldn't say that every agency under Trump has been, is tainted with politics. I haven't seen any evidence that the FDA has been tainted with politics, but I have seen evidence that NOAA has, the National weather service. I mean, we saw the little Sharpie that Trump drew on himself, and then there was a whole drama about, administrators saying, no, you're not in danger, and then coming back and say, well, maybe you might get hit by a hurricane in some very inland state. So there is evidence that Trump has infected some government agencies that are typically not political, or they try to be apolitical. The FBI, we've got William Barr as the chief
Attorney General.
attorney general. Um, has he acted in political ways? I think, yeah, there's definitely evidence for that. Uh, but has
Yeah.
Comey acted in political ways? Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to defend Comey in any way, but you can't just say that, one of these branches is okay and another one isn't, and that you have to treat them all the same. No, that Trump has worked his
Yeah.
uh,
No, I'll grant that their messaging, I think, is uh, political. I think that
well, the
what they're telling
CDC shouldn't
people,
have messaging. I mean, maybe you and I can agree on that,
yeah, I would say that anything science-based should just follow the science.
including, say, updates from Trump's doctors.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we have come to some agreement then. The doctors for Trump should not be spinning uh, things that
Yeah.
aren't true.
No. And I think you and I would both agree that the science should direct people. Uh, the the only caveat with that, uh, kind of hinging back to what I had said earlier, is sometimes the science is either just not there, or it just doesn't have enough knowledge to say things for sure.
Who gets to
And
decide?
well, and that's where modeling comes into effect. But it's when you don't know 100%, and that's what we've seen with COVID, is uh, the models were changing as we had more information, but uh, politicians and the media, and uh, then a lot of people on social media were pushing things as fact or as definitive science when it wasn't. And so COVID-19 really has been the whole system of science playing out in real time, and it confused a lot of people because they accepted early information as being science or fact when it was really best guesses, or the best advice or knowledge that we had at the time. And then when we found out more and changed that, it confused some people who didn't see that delineation.
Well, if that were true, um, and maybe what you're saying is that people should have been wearing masks but didn't because they didn't adapt to the new standards.
Well, I think it's more that people need to be clearer, uh, and it's not going to happen in politics. If something is going their way and they think it benefits them, they're going to push that narrative. But for media, they need to be a little bit more cautious to just say that, you know, this is doctors. And a lot of times in their articles, they'll say that, this was a preliminary finding or something, but the headlines sometimes say something different and
Yes.
lead people in a different direction. And so I think responsible journalism needs to, on all sides, needs to do a little bit better job of avoiding narratives and sticking with the science and listening to the scientists when they tell them, we think this is the way it is, instead of this is proven.
All we need to do is let's come to an agreement that you should get your science news from a reliable source.
Right.
All right. Well, we came to a point in an agreement. I think this is a good place to stop.
Yeah. Go science.